In this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the artists we lost in 2022. There were many artists who passed away this year, but I'm only going to mention 11 in this video. These are members of bands that I currently listen to, or I'm aware of, or I used to listen to. But for that reason, I can't mention everybody. So I just want to pay tribute. I do this video every year, so let me get into it. I'm doing these in chronological order. So on January 20th, we lost Meatloaf, or Michael Lee Ade, and he died from COVID complications. He was 74 years old. I used to listen to the Bat Out of Hell album when I was very young. I had the vinyl record. And Meatloaf was somebody I knew about. Like, I remember him in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. That was a movie I used to watch a lot when I was younger, like a teenager. And later on, he was in that movie with Tenacious D. I think it was The Pick of Destiny. So he's had a long career and was a sad loss. Next, February 1st, John Zazula, co-founder of Megadeth Records. He died from just lung problems and just different diseases. And it was he was 69 years old. This was a shocker. Like, he was a big part of metal music in the 80s. Like, he was the guy responsible for like Metallica making it big, and he helped promote the album Kill 'Em All, and he worked with lots of other thrash bands like Testament, Anthrax. He was a New York City guy, so I remember reading a lot about him in magazines, and I remember him being mentioned on the Headbangers Ball when I used to watch it. So he was a major player in the metal genre, so I wanted to mention him. Next is March 25th, Taylor Hawkins, the drummer for the Foo Fighters, and he died from, it says undisclosed reasons, and he was 50 years old. This was a big shock because I remember it distinctly, because the day that Dave Grohl released that soundtrack album to Studio 666, that soundtrack called Dream Widow, I reviewed that on a Friday night. Now, I don't always review albums like the exact day that came out, but I happened to be free that Friday night. And, a lot of times I wait until Saturday. So when I reviewed it, I didn't know about him passing, and I didn't mention it in the review. So the next morning I found out about it, and it was like a shock. It was something like nobody would have ever expected. And it was a tragedy. He was young, 50 years old, so he is definitely worth mentioning. Next, May 11th, Trevor Stunad, vocalist of the Black Dahlia Murder, and he died from undisclosed reasons at age 41. It was one of the biggest shockers in the metal community because it kind of came out of nowhere. Like, he was a vocalist, he was still very young, and they didn't really say a lot about why he died. And I'm actually not very familiar with the Black Dahlia Murder. I know about him. I've heard a few songs. But I've heard so many other of the metal channels talk about him. So I know he was a very big name. And I know he was on the previous Revocation album. So he kept appearing on these different tracks throughout the year. So it's kind of he kept reminding us who he was. So I thought that was pretty cool. Next is June 5th, Alec John Suk. He was the bassist of Bon Jovi, so he died at 70. He was one of the founding members of Bon Jovi, and he played on the first 5 albums, and those are really the only ones I ever listened to. Or I don't really listen to Bon Jovi that much. I used to in the past. I had the Slippery When Wet in New Jersey albums when I was younger, but he was 70, so that's kind of a normal age for people that pass away. But it's still sad because I'm seeing these bands from my teenage years. Now they're kind of getting old, so it is it kind of makes you feel like you're getting old. So next is July 24th, Bob Heathcote. He was a bassist for Suicidal Tendencies, and he died from injuries from a motorcycle accident, and he was 58. So he was a bass player in Suicidal Tendencies for a short time. It was in the 80s, right before Robert Trujillo joined the band, and I wanted to mention him because this was a band I used to listen to a lot back then. The only album he was on, it was called How Will I Laugh Tomorrow When I Can't Even Smile Today. That's actually a song that I used to listen to a lot when I was a teenager. Just the lyrics, they really resonated with me. And it's just a very emotional song. And for that reason, I decided to mention it in this video. Next, July 29th, Michael Bloodgood, bassist of the band Bloodgood, and he died from a stroke. Now, Bloodgood is a Christian metal band. I listened to them for a while, a couple years ago, and they're actually pretty good. They're a hard rock band. It was kind of surprising because it's a band I enjoyed. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with like the Christian metal scene, but they're actually like one of the biggest bands from the 80s. They released 5 albums in the late 80s and the early 90s. Then they had a comeback album in like 2013. If you like hard rock or melodic rock, definitely check out this band. Something different, and if you're looking for new music, check it out. The band is called Bloodgood, and let me move on. August 15th, Steve Grimmett, vocalist of Grim Reaper, died from undisclosed reasons at 62. So Grim Reaper was one of those bands that I just remember very well from Headbangers Ball, because they used to always play that music video for See You in Hell. He's just this guy with these like soaring, like big vocals, like these big like operatic vocals. And the band Grim Reaper only released 3 albums. They're all pretty good. And it was a shocker. Like this guy, Steve Grimmett, you think he's just in Grim Reaper, but he has like this really big resume of metal bands. And like if you go to his Wikipedia page, you can see all the different bands that he was in. And there's a lot of them. So he will definitely be missed. Next, August 19th, Ted Kirkpatrick. He was a drummer of Tourniquet, and he died by lung disease at 62. Another band from the Christian metal scene. They've been around since the late 80s. If you like thrash metal mixed with like classical music, definitely check out this band. Like they've been releasing lots of albums. But again, since they're from the Christian metal scene, like not a lot of people know about them. I don't really see other channels talking about them, but they have like really some pretty good albums out. So, and they have a long discography. So another band worth checking out. The name of the band is Tourniquet. Next, September 14th, David Anderson from Soilwork. He died at the age of 47, and they say undisclosed reasons. He played guitar in the band from 2012 to 22, and he was a current member. So Soilwork is one of those melodic death metal bands. I guess they don't get a lot of attention. I think he played on their most recent album, Overgiven Hidden. It's one of those bands from Sweden. They're one of the original melodic death metal bands, and one I recently started listening to. I'm not really familiar with the entire discography, but definitely worth a mention. And I have one more. November 8th, Dan McCafferty, former vocalist of Nazareth, died from undisclosed reasons at the age of 76. So he was the original vocalist for the band Nazareth, and they were a classic hard rock band. They're from Scotland, most known for the songs Hair of the Dog and Love Hurts. They were big during the 70s, and I also did like a Nazareth album ranking of just their 70s albums this year. You can find that on my channel. And that was like right after like the band Nazareth released an album this year, but they had a whole different lineup. But I've had so many people tell me that like it's not the same without Dan McCafferty, and he's definitely be missed because he is kind of like a legend in like 70s hard rock. So definitely wanted to pay tribute to him. So that's all for this video. I know I missed a lot, but it would have been difficult to mention everybody in a single video. So for that reason, I wanted to pay tribute to the ones who are mentioned here. These are bands that have had an impact on me over the years, and that is all. So thanks for watching. Please remember, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you next year. This is probably my last video of the year. I usually like wait to post this like until the 31st because you never know. I don't want to miss somebody if like somebody like dies like after I post this. So that is all, and I'll see you in the next one.